February 15, 1942. Alexandra Military Hospital, Singapore District. The morning air carried the bitter taste of ash and gunpowder as General Arthur Percival affixed his signature to the capitulation agreement with unsteady fingers. Beyond the hospital walls, 130,000 Allied combatants from Britain, Australia, and India surrendered their weapons beneath white flags in what historians would later recognize as Britain's most catastrophic military defeat. The financial expenditure protecting Singapore totaled $4.2 billion in contemporary monetary values, financed through government securities that would burden British finances for generations ahead. Yet what remained hidden from public knowledge was that this surrender would unleash a calculated extermination campaign that would fundamentally reshape the entire Pacific Theater's strategic landscape and irreversibly damage Japan's international standing. Japanese Colonel Masanobu Tsuji monitored the British capitulation ceremony through optical magnification devices, maintaining an expressionless facade while the 25th Army witnessed enemy formations emerge from fortifications displaying surrender insignia. The 70-day military campaign had conquered the fortified position initially deemed impenetrable, resulting in 9,824 Japanese casualties versus British totals of 138,708 personnel killed, injured, or detained. Nevertheless, Tsuji's concentration had already shifted toward implementing the subsequent phase. Operation Suk-Ching, the orchestrated purification through elimination, intended to neutralize all perceived Japanese opposition within Singapore's territory. The elimination strategy possessed mechanical precision. Every Chinese inhabitant aged 18 through 50 would undergo evaluation. Individuals designated as potentially hostile, educators, journalists, commercial proprietors, anybody demonstrating China-sympathetic inclinations, would face immediate termination. Tokyo's military administration projected 50,000 casualties. The genuine quantity would demonstrate exponentially more catastrophic. Infantryman Yamamoto Kenji, representing the Imperial Guard contingent, maintained his position exterior to the Ramakrishna mission structure along Tank Road. Interior chambers contained 400 Chinese detainees compressed into accommodations designed accommodating 40 educational participants. Environmental conditions registered 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Moisture saturation reached 89%. The amalgamated stench originating from collective human terror combined with decomposing tropical vegetation produced an atmosphere almost tangible against one's palate. Yamamoto enlisted believing his military obligations entailed confronting opposing combatants, not introducing lethal trauma to trembling non-combatants reminiscent of his personal Osaka neighborhood companions. His firearm, a Type 38 Arisaka operating mechanism releasing 6.55 50mm projectiles, felt unbearably substantial. Every round manufactured 2,428 foot-pounds kinetic capacity at 100-yard trajectory. Adequately sufficient for eliminating adversaries. Excessively disproportionate for terminating defenseless instructors or commercial operators. Nevertheless, command directives permitted no interpretive flexibility. The Bushido philosophical tradition mandated unqualified obedience to hierarchical instructions. Emperor Hirohito himself had authorized the elimination initiatives. Demonstrating hesitation would generate dishonor extending beyond individual Yamamoto toward his complete genealogical inheritance. Approximately 300 meters distant, merchant Lim Boon Keng positioned his sight through a fractured storefront aperture, watching Japanese troop formations transport successive gatherings of Chinese inhabitants toward maritime territories. Lim had navigated existence throughout 63 consecutive years beneath colonial British governance, establishing modest mercantile operations providing livelihoods for 12 personnel and sustaining multi-generational extended family arrangements. His storage facilities maintained 847 metric tons encompassing rice commodities, natural rubber, and metallic tin, commodities appraised at $890,000 utilizing 1942 currency standards, translating to $14.2 million employing contemporary economic valuations. Currently, all quantifiable resources possessed insignificant relevance. Japanese occupational authorities had categorized all ethnic Chinese inhabitants as possible security threats toward the Greater Asia Co-Prosperity Initiative construction. Lim's particular transgression consisted of disbursing monetary contributions supporting Chinese orphaned youth assistance programs throughout 1938. Incriminating documentation. Receipts discovered within office secure storage. Prescribed consequence: lethal bayonet perforation for ammunition conservation purposes. What remained concealed from strategic planners was that the elimination program would expand substantially beyond originally established parameters. Captain Oishi Masaru received directive authorizing extermination of 5,000 identified Japanese hostile components originating from his metropolitan sector. By February 21st, his screening apparatus had designated 18,147 inhabitants requiring termination. The numerical deviation did not reflect investigative shortcomings. It represented deliberate expansion of eradication criteria, encompassing anyone manifesting educational backgrounds, financial prosperity indicators, or prospective community influence capabilities. The screening apparatus evolved into systematized elimination machinery. Japanese military personnel assembled suspected civilians implementing interrogatory questioning, employing elementary Mandarin vocabulary. Did you demonstrate Chiang Kai-shek organizational allegiance? Did you allocate monetary resources toward China? Possess you literacy proficiency regarding Chinese written characters? Affirmative responses to whatever inquiry resulted in summary execution. However, demonstrating conversational English facility, donning Occidental garments, or displaying manipulative occupation-derived hand calluses similarly terminated prospects for survival. Captain Oishi supervised transportation vehicle loadings containing cadavers at Changi oceanfront, each conveyance transporting approximately 40 deceased individuals toward predetermined interment locations excavated by conscripted labor battalions. The manufacturing-level administrative proficiency repulsed him, yet articulating organizational objections would necessitate court-martial proceedings and subsequent execution for disobeying His Majesty's preferences. Japanese military organizational structure permitted absolutely no circumstance positioning between absolute command compliance and treacherous insurrection. British detained officer Lieutenant Colonel Charles Anderson perceived the mechanized elimination procedures from his Changi detention compartment, documenting observational particulars within a covert chronicle destined for subsequent tribunal evidentiary utilization. Anderson had administered 2 19th Battalion Command throughout Singapore defensive operations, sustaining 312 personnel fatalities and 487 personnel injury casualties throughout Japanese advancement, traversing the Malay territorial zone. Currently, he maintained helpless vigil while Japanese military operatives exterminated civilians, demonstrating equivalent methodical exactitude, characterizing their battleground tactical execution. The Japanese have revolutionized homicide into systematic production, Anderson inscribed, utilizing compressed penmanship. They manufacture death employing production line mechanization procedures, converting human beings into consumable resource material, subjected to sequential processing and subsequent disposal. Execution staging locations proliferated throughout the island geography. Punggol Maritime Zone, Sentosa Insular Territory, Tanah Merah regions, Siglap municipalities. Every installation processed between 300 through 800 termination subjects throughout daily operational intervals. Japanese commanders prioritized bayonet and sword-based execution methodologies for ammunition, resource preservation, allocated toward military campaign requirements, yet the psychological ramifications affecting their personnel began precipitating disciplinary malfunctions, threatening organizational cohesion stability. By March 4th, the 18th Division personnel had executed 23,742 Chinese civilian inhabitants. The 5th Division submitted elimination documentation tallying 31,068 terminations. Imperial Guard Division accounting recorded 19,284 death occurrences. Comprehensive documented execution totals: 74,094 individual deaths. The genuine figure would perpetually remain mathematically indeterminate due to maritime disposal methodologies and undocumented interment throughout island territories. Yet what Japanese military administrative hierarchy catastrophically miscalculated was the unanticipated strategic consequence resulting from their mechanized brutality application. Intelligence regarding Singapore elimination campaigns transmitted through Allied reconnaissance networks within calendar weeks, disseminated by refugee populations escaping toward British jurisdictions throughout Borneo and Burmese territories. Initial intelligence assessments dismissed such communications as exaggerated propagandistic fabrications. Documented quantities appeared mathematically implausible. However, photographic documentation obtained through Chinese underground resistance networks substantiated elimination scope and deliberately orchestrated operational characteristics. The verification fundamentally restructured Allied propagandistic communication tactics instantaneously. Preceding Singapore incidents, Allied publication emphasis concentrated upon Japanese territorial conquest and military aggression manifestations. Subsequently, communicative focus shifted, highlighting Japanese brutality toward civilian populations, utilizing corroborated elimination documentation, supporting absolute unconditional surrender advocacy, and unrestricted war resource allocation designed systematically destroying adversaries, characterized as fundamentally non-human entities. American civilian population opinion underwent remarkable transformation. Pre-elimination polling demonstrated 67% supporting negotiated settlements, conditional upon Japanese territorial repatriation. Post-elimination polling exhibited 89% supporting unqualified surrender mandates, combined with limitless military expenditure authorizations for conclusive Japanese destruction. Singapore atrocities had eliminated negotiation possibilities that potentially would have constrained Pacific War magnitude and operational duration. Chinese underground movements spanning Southeast Asia geographic territories experienced unprecedentedly magnified popular encouragement subsequent to Singapore intelligence distribution throughout Chinese diaspora societies. Preceding elimination events, anti-Japanese guerrilla organizations experienced recruitment difficulties and financial support acquisition complications. Subsequently, Chinese populations inhabiting Malayan regions, Burmese territories, Thai jurisdictions, and Indonesian zones allocated substantial financial backing and logistical provisioning, supporting resistance operational networks. The Malayan Communist Organization membership expanded from 3,000 toward 47,000 throughout March-December 1942 progression. The Thai-Chinese resistance organizational structure evolved from 500 participating individuals into 12,300 operational combatants. Throughout Burmese territories, Chinese-supported guerrilla operational capabilities multiplied from 12 independent assemblies toward 89 coordinated militant organizations. The elimination campaign had manufactured region-wide insurrectionary phenomena, draining Japanese materials throughout subsequent military progression. Japanese Lieutenant General Yamashita Tomoyuki, commanding the victorious Singapore assault operation, privately communicated concerns regarding elimination campaign strategic ramifications through categorized communications directing toward Tokyo headquarters. The elimination initiatives have accomplished regional security parametric objectives, nevertheless manufactured substantial political complications, potentially compromising prolonged occupation administrative sustainability. He transmitted throughout March 15 classified transmission, subsequently intercepted through Allied cryptanalytic capabilities. Yamashita's prognostications demonstrated remarkable prescience. The Singapore elimination campaign subsequently furnished foundational prosecution documentation supporting post-warfare military tribunal proceedings, executing hundreds of Japanese military administrators, and permanently destroying Japanese international reputational standing, extending multiple decades forward. Concurrently, atrocities crystallized Allied resistance determination throughout Pacific operational theaters and eliminated negotiation possibilities protecting Japanese territorial acquisitions. The psychological impact upon Japanese military personnel executing civilian elimination procedures manufactured unforeseen organizational discipline complications. Institutional medical documentation originating from 25th Army personnel registered escalating rates encompassing alcoholic intoxication, command authority resistance, and psychological deterioration among combatants participating in non-combatant liquidation proceedings. Through April 1942, 3 regimental organizations required personnel replacement attributable to operational ineffectiveness resulting from psychiatrically termed conscience-based psychological trauma manifestation. Private Yamamoto Kenji ranked among psychologically affected personnel. His confidential diary, recovered throughout 1995 within Osaka familial residence collections, demonstrated acute psychological suffering originating from consistent participation within systematic human termination. I registered within military service anticipating military combat operations, confronting adversary combatants, not perpetrating bayonet trauma against educational administrators and commercial merchants. Each termination procedure renders me progressively less Japanese, progressively less humanistic. I apprehend returning toward domestic residence metamorphosed into unrecognizable stranger to myself and genealogical connections. Yamamoto's private documentation chronicled 47 distinct termination assignments spanning February 18th through March 22nd, 1942 progression. His regimental unit processed approximately 73 daily casualties. Documentation entries deteriorated progressively regarding legibility proportionate to psychological condition degradation, ultimately transforming into incomprehensible schematic illustrations of facial physiognomies and redundant remorse declarations inscribed utilizing multilingual character systems. Concurrently, Chinese commercial proprietor Lim Boon Keng perpetuated survival status bypassing preliminary screening procedures through dispersing monetary precious metals toward Japanese linguistic interpreter intermediaries, utilizing coinage concealed beneath footwear sole compartments. However, continued existence necessitated witnessing continuous elimination proceedings from hiding position within devastated commercial repository adjacent maritime installations. This experience fundamentally transmuted him originating moderate commercial identity toward resolute underground resistance coordination. I administered observation toward systematic neighbor elimination employing accountant-equivalent procedural precision. Lim documented within published 1963 autobiographic compositions. Each termination underwent registration, administrative categorization, and hierarchical command documentation comparable to routine military accounting documentation. The Japanese had normalized genocide into standardized administrative procedure. Lim's commercial facility transformed into covert intelligence coordination headquarters, supporting Chinese underground organizational activities throughout Southeast Asia geographic zones. Employing pre-war commercial relationship networks, he established messenger infrastructure transporting intelligence encompassing Japanese force distribution patterns, materiel insufficiency indicators, and defensive infrastructure preparations toward Allied commanders positioned throughout Indian and Australian territories. The transmitted intelligence demonstrated consequential importance regarding consequent Allied offensive procedure formulation, enabling eventual territorial recuperation. The elimination campaign's strategic consequences transcended immediate Pacific operation parameters extensively. Soviet administrative leader Joseph Stalin employed corroborated Japanese atrocity documentation, substantiating Pacific theater military intervention, characterizing such participation, representing civilized nation moral responsibility concerning fascistic governance destruction, implementing systematic human eradication. Stalin's August 1945 Manchurian invasion deployment received justification framing as compensatory response addressing Japanese criminality perpetrated toward Asian civilian populations. British administrative leader Winston Churchill incorporated Singapore elimination documentation into diplomatic communication transactions with American leadership, employing documented Japanese brutality, advocating American commitment toward absolute military objective accomplishment rather than negotiated settlement alternatives. International relations cannot accommodate governance regimes perpetrating production-scale murder operations. Churchill articulated within categorized memoranda, transmitted toward President Roosevelt throughout April 1942. The elimination campaign additionally influenced Allied bombing administration policy regarding Japanese urban centers. Preceding Singapore, American military administrative personnel concentrated operational emphasis toward precision-targeted assault procedures directed toward military installations and commercial manufacturing facilities. Subsequently, administrative consideration embraced regionalized bombing tactics purposefully designed terrorizing civilian populations, academically rationalized constituting compensatory response addressing Japanese territorial atrocity manifestations. Tokyo firebombing, Yokohama conflagration, Kobe destruction, and analogous municipal devastation initiatives originated moral authorization tracing directly toward documented Japanese elimination campaign brutality throughout subjugated regions. Throughout warfare conclusion, the Singapore Elimination Campaign had contributed toward strategic administrative determinations, extending Pacific engagement duration, magnifying casualty accumulation, encompassing both military and civilian populations, and eradicating negotiation possibilities, protecting Japanese territorial preservation circumstances. Japanese military command hierarchy's authorization perpetrating systematic genocide had metamorphosed regional territorial competition into international struggle, determining fundamental moral supremacy definitions. The subsequent accountability procedure demonstrated comprehensive and unforgiving characteristics. Multinational conflict accountability tribunals prosecuted 5,700 Japanese military administrative personnel, addressing crimes encompassing anti-humanity classifications. 984 individuals received execution determinations. 1,018 individuals received indefinite imprisonment authorizations. The jurisprudential precedents established throughout these proceedings subsequently influenced contemporary international legal governance development and manufactured conceptual infrastructure underlying contemporary humanitarian protection conventions. Colonel Masanobu Tsuji, orchestrating Singapore Elimination Campaign planning, circumvented prosecution procedures via escape toward Chinese territories and consequent unexplained disappearance. His survival disposition remained unconfirmed throughout considerable time span. However, documentations disclosed throughout 1995 demonstrated Chinese communist militant organizations apprehended and executed him throughout 1961. Postponed justice, yet ultimately administered. The elimination campaign's consequence regarding Singapore demographic transformation persisted across generational intervals. Municipal Chinese population quantity diminished from 742,000 throughout 1941 toward 394,000 throughout 1945 warfare termination. Substantial survivor quantities emigrated permanently, apprehending prospective persecution recurrence possibilities. The societal and financial dislocation necessitated generational restoration intervals, permanently modifying Singapore's progression trajectory. Contemporary Singapore memorializes the elimination campaign through the civilian warfare memorial structure, consecrated throughout 1967. The monument configuration exhibits 4 architectural columns representing 4 ethnic groupings: Chinese inhabitants, Malay inhabitants, Indian inhabitants, and European inhabitants, sustaining Japanese occupation brutality. Massacre casualty corporeal remains underwent interment beneath the architectural construction, persisting perpetually reminding observers regarding sacrifice expenses associated with opposition resistance failures toward systematic dehumanization procedures. Educational administrative frameworks throughout Singapore academic institutions emphasize elimination campaign narratives functioning as preventative instruction regarding ethnic animosity, consequences, and unconstrained military administrative authority ramifications. Student populations acquire comprehension that casualty populations underwent elimination not attributable to comportment demonstrations, but reflecting categorical demographic designation, incompatibility with administrative authority political preferences. The Singapore Elimination Campaign manifested that mechanized brutality implementation frequently manufactures contradictory strategic consequences opposing deliberate intentions. Rather than accomplishing conquered demographic pacification, murder procedures manufactured determined underground resistance manifestations. Rather than intimidating supplementary prospective competitors, atrocity manifestations fortified Allied determination, supporting conclusive victory accomplishment. Rather than advancing Japanese strategic objectives, genocide implementation undermined worldwide cooperation and moral legitimacy, imperative supporting prolonged operational success. Maybe substantially importantly, the elimination campaign exposed organizational efficiency, metamorphosis, into systematic murder instrumentation velocity, when cultural civilization limitations, circumscribing civilian-directed violence, undergo systematic administrative withdrawal. Japanese combatants implementing execution procedures possessed no inherent malevolence. They represented standard humans executing hierarchical directives within administrative apparatus that possessed redefined mass casualty generation as patriotic responsibility. The communication transmitted by massacre witnesses persisting recording observations maintained unwavering consistency. Administrative malevolence succeeds when standard individuals self-convince that command compliance absolves them from moral accountability, addressing behavioral action consequences. The massacre materialized not reflecting Japanese combatant monstrosity, rather representing human beings, permitting institutional allegiance, subordinating individual conscience, overriding. Authentic strength transcends mechanical order execution, encompassing conscience preservation, regardless of administrative authority commands demanding humanistic abandon.